And what I can do is literally just copy these notes and just paste them directly into notation. Hi there, my name's Vince, I'm a composer. In this video, I wanted to do a really quick spotlight of a crazy feature in Dorico, which for me personally is a bit of a game changer. I'm somebody who often composes by just playing in things at the keyboard, kind of overdubbing stuff, and I use a lot of full ensemble patches, especially with strings. I like to just create a bit of a mess of MIDI parts and then figure out exactly how they're going to be arranged further down the line. This is just a MIDI file that I've imported directly from Logic into Dorico. This is all Dorico on the left. And you can see it and kind of just view the material really nice and easily here in the piano roll. And what I can do is literally just copy these notes and just paste them directly into notation. So that's really good. It allows me to just identify, okay, this is probably going to be the bass line here, you know, this might be a cello line here, and just literally kind of drag and drop them into the notation. So it's really clean. There's an orange track here, there's a yellow overdub here. I can select material from all of that and paste it into a single voice very easily. So let me continue with my selection here. Now we're moving into the orange region that we saw in that other window and the yellow region there. And I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to do a special kind of paste. You can also set it to a key command. I've got it set to Shift Command V, and that just pastes it all into a single voice like that. Absolutely brilliant. Another cool thing you can do is use this in combination with the explode feature, which is something that is also at present in Sibelius, but here it just comes in extra useful in combination with this sort of workflow. I've selected all the two lower voices there and I want to assign them to the cello and the double bass. It's as simple as just hitting Command C, and then I select both of these, and I'm going to use Option E, which is my custom key command, and that just explodes the selection across these two staves here. So very cool stuff. Let me just give you a bit of context as to why I think this is super useful. So more traditionally, I'd be looking at something like this if we go into write mode. This is the kind of import of my MIDI sketches here. If I zoom out a little bit. Like, it's done a pretty good job of understanding it, but kind of just to look at visually, it's very hard to get a sense of the number of voices and different inner lines and, you know, what's high and what's low, and it's all just a bit of a mess in terms of trying to make sense of that. In comparison to this in play mode, we can sort of see very clearly the storyline of this arrangement. We can see where kind of melodies are. We can see where there's probably going to be lines that we want to create out of the combination of MIDI. To take a very specific example, here in the piano roll, we can easily see that this note from one region and this note from another region are forming a connected line. So that's probably going to be one violin part there. But if we look at bar 11 in the write mode, which is what I'd normally be looking at, it's very difficult to see. Where is it? We've got this note here, and then it's going to this note over here. This D, so it's a C to D. You know, I just wouldn't really spot that as a pattern. So normally, in order to make sense of the arrangement and figure out how I'm going to distribute it to the different instruments, I'd be looking at Logic's piano roll, either on a separate screen or to the side of Sibelius as I'm working, so that I can kind of look at the map of the track and understand, you know, bar to bar, what are the important lines and what are just more like filler notes. Now I can be looking at this kind of map of the track and spot, okay, here's a line that's probably going to want to be played on a single instrument. I can just select all of the notes, and I know it starts at bar 5, and I just select bar 5, and I'm going to do my Shift Command V, and that just plonks in the notes like that, and it means I can just get back to focusing what's the next step, you know, or what are my creative options here, rather than worrying about just manual note entry. So now let me show you step by step how I kind of set things up ready for this workflow. So here's where it all started. This is where I was just sketching in some parts. This was my initial idea that I just played in the keyboard with my breath controller. So all I did was, first of all, just tidy up the MIDI a little bit by selecting them all and tweaking them in the piano roll as necessary, tweaking the note lengths and doing a bit of quantizing. Then it's just a case of selecting the regions, export as MIDI file. Over in Dorico, just create a new string orchestra from a template. Give that a second to load. Now I can rename the project by hitting Command I. And what I'm going to do is just go over to File, Import MIDI. locate the file, and it's already assigned them to strings based on my previous import settings. I mean, you have the usual interpretive options. You've got, your basic quantize options there and that kind of thing. I'm going to leave that set to 8th note, but I'm going to change this to bring it into my current flow. For non-Dorico users, a flow is simply a movement within a greater musical work. So for example, movements within a symphony, or it could be tracks within an album, or numbers within a musical, that kind of thing. The sort of upshot of working with flows is that you get to have multiple pieces of music contained within a single Dorico project file. So as you can see, it's imported the MIDI kind of in the usual fashion. It's given it a bit more detail than Sibelius would have done. For example, it's noticed that there's some slurring and things like that. But this is not what we want. I'm going to go over to Setup here, and in the full score view, I'm going to deselect these, which just hides them from my full score. So that gives us a nice clean canvas to work with. And then I'm going to create a new layout by clicking down here. And I'll call that String Sketch. And I'm going to drag it to the top here. Now I'm going to add my String Sketch imported MIDI and click this button down here to add it to the flow. And that's it. Now if I go back to write mode, I can kind of easily flick between the string sketch and the full score. So now this is where the fun begins. So we come over to this humble button here called play, and we're going to press that, and we're immediately into sort of DAW land, basically. We have a lot of familiar elements, and if we switch over to our string sketch here, we can see the view that you were seeing earlier. We can't multi-select these regions, but if we double-click them, we get the piano roll. And so to view multiple regions within a single key editor window, we can just come over to this button here, click this, lock, and then view multiple instruments, and just select all of those, and they'll show up, albeit in slightly shaded out forms, because it wants to decide one of them as primary, so the primary is going to be highlighted, but it doesn't really matter for our purposes. The next thing I'm going to do is just determine how I want these tracks to be played back in terms of the audio engine. So I'm going to come over to this track inspector area, hit VST and MIDI, and this little plus icon, and I'm just going to create a piano for now. And now it means I can select that piano as the playback device for all of these tracks. So now if I click on one of these notes, we get some audio feedback, just as we'd expect, so that's very handy. Now all that remains is to do a little bit of housekeeping, just rearrange my windows so that it's nice and tidy and ready for me to start inputting notes. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit Shift-Command-T, and that just creates a new Dorico window. Sometimes takes a second, there we go. And I'm going to set this one to full score and go back into write mode. Then on Mac, the way that I quite like to do this is to just maximize this window and then drag this in like that. And that gives us a nice workspace where we can easily resize it however we want. Finally, I'm going to maximize the size of this window. We can also hide the toolbar if we want, but I'm going to leave it for now because I quite like being able to switch between the different modes. And that's pretty much it. We can resize the magnification of these MIDI blocks by using G and H. Shift-Command-G does it that way. Unfortunately, for me, it doesn't quite do it enough. I would like it if you could compress it even further, just so that I could see more of this in a relatively small bit of window space. A nice detail is if you zoom in far enough, you get the actual note labels. So again, it just makes it very easy to kind of quickly see what this represents. And now we're ready to start inputting notes. So if we at any point want to listen to our reference track, we can just hit play while having the left-hand side selected. But if we drag some notes in here, as we did before, and play back in this window, it'll play back in Note Performer as we'd expect. And that's basically it. So just to finish off the video, I'll use this method to flesh out the string arrangement for this little sketch that I've done. So full disclosure, I have actually arranged this set of MIDI previously as a sort of practice run for this recording. So I'm not doing it completely fresh, but I think it's still worth seeing as a kind of idealized workflow, so you can see exactly what the steps are to kind of get from this messy MIDI to a finished arrangement. I've got the notation here set to galley view, which just gives us a continuous scroll. You can set that down here. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a time signature by hitting Shift M. Those are called popovers, and they're very useful for accessing all kinds of functions within Dorico just from the keyboard. So we'll do what we did before, copy that, and I'm going to use Shift Command V to do a special paste that puts it all into a single voice. Then I'm going to take my bass line and the voice above it to create my cello and double bass parts. I can just select the top one of these actually and hit Option E, and that pastes it across both. Next I'm going to create my violin 2 part. So I know this is going to want to be violin 2, so I'm going to work backwards, and I think I'm going to include this and this. And again, because we're spanning multiple colors here, multiple regions, I'm going to do Command C and then Command Shift V when I paste it. So it's pasting from bar 3. Command Shift V. And that simply creates our second violin part. And all that's left to do is this inner line here, which then quite naturally follows up here to complete the harmony. And that's starting at bar 5, Command Shift V. And that's pretty much it. So we've got a bit of a mess here at the end. So what's interesting is when you select this note here, it considers it all as a single note. One upshot of that is that it plays very nicely with another one of Dorico's features, which is if I select this and then hold Shift, Option, and then left and right arrow keys, I can extend the note or shorten it as much as I like just by doing that. So let's bring them all to the end of the bar actually. So extend that like that. So let's just have a listen to this arrangement. Some nice disturbing string chords there at the end. And obviously there's plenty I could do now to start adding articulations and dynamics and stuff like that, but this just gives me a nice starting point without a lot of pain or hassle. Depending on how busy the arrangement is and how much like overlapping there is between the imported MIDI, I may want to use this option over here to hide or display the various parts. So for example, if I just want the red to display, then I can do that. Hiding the MIDI notes like that doesn't actually affect the playback. So if I play from here, you can still hear that higher repeating part. If you did just want to listen to one of the MIDI layers in isolation, you can do that. Currently, I've got all of these set to the same piano instrument, so clicking mute or solo on any of these affects all of them. But if I changed this to, say, Note Performer instead, just as an example, by going here, you know, that suddenly gives me independent control over this one track. So yeah, that's how that works. So there we are. I hope some of you are as delighted and surprised to find out about this feature as I am. I'm certainly now seriously considering switching to Dorico as my main notation software. I guess I sort of got to the point where, because I don't use Sibelius a whole lot, but I'm starting to, and I'm starting to become more interested in arranging in general. It feels like the time to either dig down and really get all of my key commands together and all of my workflow together in Sibelius, or to invest that time in something else. And it's looking like that something else is going to be Dorico, just because this particular feature with the key editor is a real game changer for me. Dorico is generally very clean. It's very good at tidying up after you. So if you move notes around or you change note rhythmic values, you won't be left with any kind of weird rests or strange groupings. It'll just to do a lot of that tidy up for you, which again just means I can focus on making music without having to worry about also making my part beautiful. Dorico does a lot of that for you. And just at a more emotional level, being able to work in an environment that is much cleaner, the whole design, the layout, the graphic design, everything, it just makes it a more enjoyable place to spend time. And So I'm excited about this unlocking a lot of creative potential for me in terms of just leaning into this more old school approach of arranging out things properly rather than staying in the world of the DAW. The DAW is still my primary creative tool, but for me there comes a point where I just want a little bit of extra visibility over the material that I'm working with, especially in styles of music like classical music or orchestral music or big band writing, where it's very important to make sure that you have this bird's eye view and you're not missing any details, and the overall arrangement has a kind of logic. Not to mention all those times that I want to quickly bang out a score for a live player. So that's it from me. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you find this useful. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care.